we have to remember that when we're interacting with these people on the calls, and the calls are stacking up, but whatever we're dealing with, that is an important incident for that person. And we have to show them that we value what they're going through, and we have empathy for what they're going through. And that's how we can connect with the community.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Blah, Blah, Blah Something Wellness Podcast, brought to you by the National Police Podcast Network. I am your host, Tami Sharp, joined by my partner in all things, Chris Zamora. We have a familiar returning guest and one of our team members, and we have a fresh face to all of you, not to me. I've known this guy for quite some time. We have Chief Funk in the house with us, as well as Neil. On that, Neil, will you please introduce yourself? And then Rodger, I will have you introduce yourself.
Yeah, Neil Cervenka, retired police chief. I did first 7 years in the Air Force Police, then 22 years with Central Valley, California agency, getting to an acting captain rank. And then I took a job as chief of police on the Mendocino Coast in Northern California. So I have a total of 32 years in uniform with a badge before I retired. And I've been retired since October 1st of last year. And it's a wonderful, wonderful thing.
You're wearing it well. Making people jealous. Awesome. Thank you for being here. And Rodger, tell us about yourself.
Yes, my name's Rodger Funk, and I'm currently the police chief in Blaine for Blaine Police Department in Blaine, Washington, right along the Canadian border. Been here for about 2.5 years. Before that, I did 28 years with the Whatcom County Sheriff's Office, where I did a little bit of everything from forest patrol, motorcycles, collision investigation, rose up through the ranks to different things there. But I actually started my career at a jail at the one county south of us. So done a little bit of everything throughout my career, and I just hit the 30-year mark. I've been doing this for 30 years now.
And I've known you that long. So we'll get into this. So this topic is connecting with community. And so we are speaking to two different audiences. We are talking to our law enforcement audience that we have, but I'm hoping that this finds some community members and kind of fills in some gaps for you, maybe some questions that you might have about why do cops do what they do, and maybe we should think differently about how we react to some of these things, like getting pulled over and whatnot. So on that note, we're going to back it up a little bit. Rodger, will you go into the beginning of your career? I'm not going to bury the lead on this. We have a very special to me mutual connection. So I'm going to let you talk about me. No, I'm going to let you talk about my dad.
Yeah, so Tim, I think you were probably a teenager when I first met you
Mm-hmm.
in a little town called Concrete in Skagit County. But just north of Concrete, you have to drive through Skagit County to get back into Whatcom County, where I was a resident deputy. So the agency I worked for was unique, and some of the jurisdictions were so far remote that deputies had to live in these outposts. And I lived at the outpost at a little place called Baker Lake. It was a lake created by Puget Sound Energy for a dam for hydroelectric. And I replaced a gentleman there that was retiring named George Sharp, which happens to be your father.
Yes.
And so I got to work with him for a few weeks in his last couple weeks of his career before he retired. And although he retired, he continued to do he continued to be impactful and influential and involved in that region beyond that. So that's how you and I originally met, was in that outpost.
Yes, and he never really retired. He carried a badge no matter what. Always was like, he would pull people over. He just flashed the badge and be like, over.
Do I have your permission to tell you a funny story about your dad after he retired?
Yeah.
So they had concrete days where they closed down the streets and they had vendor fairs and people were wandering around. And I went down there, and your dad had retired, but he was in full sheriff's office uniform working the event.
Yep.
And so I went to him, hey, what are you doing? You're in our uniform. He goes, it's the only uniform I have. So he never really quit.
He never did. Chris teaches about duty-driven deterioration, and my dad was an awesome person, but he was also what we call overinvested. Never took a break, always in uniform. And because of the outpost, so he went up to Newhalem, which is a very remote little podunk town. It's a 1 mile long town. It's 14 miles to the nearest gas station one way, 72 miles over the pass to the next town, and it was us. And he was responsible for that entire 72-mile radius, just him. And then his closest backup was one state trooper that lived 14 miles away. And he had multi-jurisdictions. So Whatcom, Skagit, he had Border Patrol, Park Service. So anywhere we went, he had a badge or something for that. And a little bit of a we'll say healthy ego with that power. But no, he was a really good, and he could be an asshole. There's no if, and, or but about that. But he was also tough, and he was fair, and he was nice, and he understood the importance of community. So that's where I kind of want to start this one, because what I think is really cool is to see you from the beginning of your career, 30 years later as a chief, implementing some of those lessons you learned in those first couple weeks. So if you want to talk on that a little bit.
So I was pretty young cop when I was working in that outpost, and working with him, I was all about, let's go catch the bad guys. Let's go make some traffic stops. Let's make some arrests. Let's, be everything you saw on the cop show. That's like what I wanted to do. And he drove me around and forced me, kind of reluctantly on my part, to meet all the people in the community. So the people who were camping up there, the power plant people, the people at the coffee shop. It wasn't really a stand; it was a coffee shop in concrete. The post office. I'm like, what? Why are we doing this? Like, we should be out catching people. And he's like, this is your community. These are the people that will be there for you when you need them. You need to build up these advocates. And I really didn't get it at the time. It's probably a couple years later before I finally realized the lesson and the value of the lesson that he was teaching me. But it paid off while I was up there. There was times that were downright scary, very violent times with some hardcore criminals, and I had locals standing shoulder to shoulder with me, ready to help me out because I had made those connections with people. I'd made that investment in a time when I didn't need to. So when the time came where I needed the assistance or I needed the backing, that relationship was already built.
I love that. And that's where I really want to dive in with everybody, because across the country, with social media and the media and all of the stuff that's being inundated and the narratives and the algorithms and things that are being pushed, there's all of this cop hate. And the cop hate's there. It's not going anywhere. I understand, but it has escalated. And I think that a lot of the issue is when we talk with the law enforcement community and we talk about proactive policing or community policing, everybody kind of rolls their eyes at it because it's like, well, what does that actually mean? And I'm like, what does community policing mean to people, or proactive policing? And proactive, a lot of people, the cops were like, well, we write tickets and we stop this and we do that. And we need to really dissect what these terms mean and what that looks like. Proactive. Everything that we do with wellness with our law enforcement coaching is proactive, preventative maintenance. And I feel like where the trust has been broken down in the communities, we are in a very reactive model by everybody. So with Chris and Neil, how was it with you? I know, Chris, you've talked about this on many, many podcasts about how the media makes it seem like everybody hates cops, but when you were still on, everybody was waving at you all day, every day. So what is your guys' experience with community and being out in there connecting?
Well, I think it depends on what investment that agency does in the community to begin with, because you got to put a lot of investment in, so when something goes bad, you don't go all the way to zero again. I think right now we have a few voices that are very loud, that are very anti-law enforcement. But I retired in an area that's very, very liberal, very, very blue, and we had a great relationship. The police department did, because we put a lot of effort into it, and it was authentic effort. It wasn't checkbox stuff. So But you get the Three Stooges that come up to city council meeting and public comment and spew their hate. And every chief has his own Three Stooges, right, Roger?
I think I've got four.
Four. Okay. The number varies. I just call them the Three Stooges because generally there's at least three, um, and it's a matter of listening to what they have to say, and sometimes about 10% of what they say has some validity, and then you need to take action on that. You need to correct that or do something more for the community. But right now it's like an anti-flock thing that's hitting law enforcement, and it's sad because it's such an amazing tool, and um, but that's again, I think maybe law enforcement failed a little bit by just doing a community meeting, and then everyone said, yeah, it sounds like a good tool, and then we put them up, and we didn't continually let people know what that tool was there for and what it can do and what it can't do. And that's a failure on law enforcement leadership for not doing that more clearly.
The community needs to understand the why.
Mhm.
There's no real education on that. And so we were just starting to get into this off camera. Um, because my dad was a cop, I grew up in a law enforcement household. So a lot of things were just ingrained and explained to me from a young age. I understood why we do things. When I learned to drive, I learned how to, operate the car. I learned the laws, and I was taught what to do on a traffic stop. How, yes sir, no sir, yes ma'am, no ma'am. The side of the road is not a court of law. Stop it. Stop trying to flex all of these things. And I want my lawyer, but the thing is, the community doesn't know that. They were never taught. And they don't teach it in schools. And now, from my understanding, even driver's ed, when I was growing up, driver's ed was taught at the school. And now you have to go to these private companies and go do all of these things. So nobody's getting the basics of what law enforcement is. They just get the headlines and you get pulled over. And look, this is what I think is fun working with law enforcement. We've all been pulled over. Have you guys been pulled over? Okay. It sucks getting pulled over. You guys are chiefs and you're still just like, oh, crap. Right? It's funny when Chris is driving, I'm like, it's like, oh, there's a cop. It's really funny because you don't know. And there's so many multi moving parts to getting pulled over just on a regular traffic stop. That's not explained either. So one, okay, maybe you're speeding, maybe, your registration's expired, whatever the reason is that they're pulling you over. Now, what the community needs to understand, you're getting pulled over maybe for the first time and you're like, I didn't do anything, but you need to understand the dangers that go into these traffic stops. And we can kind of unpack that as well, that the cops don't know you. They don't know who you are or what you're doing or why. So they have a right and a reason for questioning you. So don't be an asshole about it, please. So we can get into some of these things, but let's just kind of educate the community a little bit on the whys. Um, and then also for the law enforcement that is listening to this, stop just being reactive. Don't sit in your patrol car and not talk to anybody unless it is you're responding to a call. Go to the coffee shops, go out, talk to people. And I think probably for the most part, a lot do, maybe not the bigger cities. Chris, you were in an interesting place because Gilbert was very small when you started, but then now it's grown and this whole valley has grown. So how did you see it when you started law enforcement throughout the growth? How did you see the shifts?
Well, being a young cop, you learn. You learn from your FTOs, you learn from the experienced officers, and kind of like what Roger was talking about with your dad, riding with your dad. I rode with an FTO who at that time, his name is Ernie, and at that time he looked like he was 70 years old. And he's still alive today, so he must be over 100, well over 100 years old.
Yeah, send this
But
to him.
good for Ernie because he's still alive and he retired years ago. But Ernie was a like kind of perceived as a grumpy old salty cop, right? And he would not take uh in training ITOs and training officers because he didn't want to babysit, right? And I needed an FTO and he volunteered to be my FTO, and I was terrified because I heard bad stuff, not bad stuff, but the horror stories that this guy, he's an old salty cop. And for whatever reason, he said he would train me. And much like Roger, we rode around, but we would stop. We drove through neighborhoods and we would stop at different houses. If he saw somebody working on their car outside, he'd pull over. He'd say, "Let's go talk to this guy." And or wherever we'd go into a strip mall, he'd stop, walk into a place and just talk. And it was driving me insane because I'm like, I didn't see this in cops. Like, this is not what we do. We chase, right? We're supposed to go arrest bad guys. But Ernie was big into the community. He was big on just introducing himself, talking, and people knew him. People would wave at him. But he explained to me that that is the importance of policing is, yes, we're going to come across bad guys, but for the most part, we're going to come across your normal, average, everyday person. And in some of those cases, those people are going to call us because they're having the worst day of their entire life, right? Whatever happened to them. So it's important to maintain those open lines of communication. And Neil, you talked about the flock cameras. Yeah, there's probably a breakdown in communication on the benefits of having those cameras. And so what happens when communication breaks down? People aren't happy with you, right? And they're going to listen to whatever social media tells them or whatever Hollywood tells them or whatever they see on TV. They're going to listen to that. If law enforcement, if you don't have a voice out there and you're not using your PIOs to pump out the positive stories, you're going to fall behind and you're going to create that barrier. So I learned early in my career from an old school cop about policing, getting out there, getting out of your patrol car, and just walking and talking. And I'm so glad I rode with Ernie because he totally taught me that. And the fact that he's still alive tells me after you retire doesn't mean you have to die. Like he's out there living his best life right now. So many thanks to Ernie for teaching me about community policing. But that's important.
Well, I think you guys bring up a good point. So when you're new into the profession, you're looking for action. You're young, you stay up past 8 o'clock and you want to be out there, you bust the bad guys, all of that. And that community piece, you guys all said, that's not fancy, that's not flashy. I think we should probably see if Randy wants to come on. We've had Randy Sutton come on several times. And he was probably on my TV. Like my dad had Cops on all the time. And Randy was on multiple episodes of Cops. I will say, as we've gotten to know him, he also is one of the most social, down to earth, knows how to communicate, knows how to talk to people, treats everybody with respect guy. And so we should bring him back on and talk about that too, because he influenced a lot of the cops of like, hey, bust the bad guys. For the younger generation, you guys had to learn through trial and error, and most people listening to this are going to have to do the same. But maybe somebody will listen to you. A young buck will be like, I'm going to go be nicer to the community. What would you say to the young generation that is like raring to go? How would you invite them to go connect with the community? Like this week, what can they do that's super easy?
So I'll tell you a story about something that I hired. I think last year he came on with us, and he came from a bigger agency that was very busy, call to call to call, driving, reports, and he quit without another job lined up because it wasn't what he thought it was going to be. He thought he would have a chance to be more engaged with people, and so when he came on board here, or when he was considering coming on board, I drove him all over town and I introduced him to people and kind of modeled the way with him a little bit. Like, this is what's important to me, and I'm going to hire people that embrace that it's important to be engaged with the community. So you ask, how do you teach them that? You model it and you invite them along. When I go out places, I make sure I try to invite officers with me whenever I can, even if it's just for a few minutes, so they can see me model that behavior, just like your dad did with me when I was riding with him. I didn't get the lesson at the time, but it still sunk in.
Well, that's a really good point too. For those that are training, it may not seem, this is like, we have teenagers now. I took my daughter on a road trip. We have been road tripping for years, and this year was a little different because we got in, she put her headphones on, she's like, see you when we get there. And I was like, okay. And she was so bored the whole time. But I remembered I had to put myself in check because I remember doing road trips at that age and I was the exact same. However, all of those memories and lessons 1000% stuck. So you got to trust the process, and it might be a little bit of a delayed reaction, but you are going to have an impact. Lead by example and do all of that. Um, you guys also, here's the thing, you guys came from a little bit smaller agencies where you have the luxury where you're not just call, like the bigger cities where it's just kicking out nonstop. For those in the big cities, when there's calls, just call. And there might be like, yeah, that's nice. We'd love to be able to go to the coffee shop and connect, but we don't have time. But that's the thing is if you make the time and you do slow it down a little bit to connect, eventually you won't have so many calls because again, the community is going to work with you and for you instead of everybody just chaos and pandemonium all the time.
So I'll push back on that a little bit because I think
Okay.
they can connect, but the people they're connecting with is the people on the call. Make them feel valued, make them feel heard. So I have a cousin that called me one time, absolutely hysterical, crying because she said she'd just been in a crash and she didn't think to call 911. She called her cousin, the cop. And so I asked her what happened. Oh, somebody hit her car. Like, are you okay? Yeah, I wasn't in the car. Well, what do you mean you weren't in the car? Well, she came out, saw somebody back in her car and drive away. To her, it was the most impactful, meaningful, serious thing that she's ever dealt with. She'd never been a victim of a crime, never been involved with law enforcement. And for me, as a traffic guy investigated crashes, that was a Tuesday. And so we have to remember that when we're interacting with these people on the calls, and yeah, the calls are stacking up, but whatever we're dealing with, that is an important incident for that person. And we have to show them that we value what they're going through and we have empathy for what they're going through. And that's how we can connect with the community because those people will then go tell their friends, their families, their coworkers, yeah, this thing happened and this young officer came to my house and boy, he was so kind. And so we are connecting. It's just not at a community event.
And to jump on that, I was working before the chief spot. Our agency was call to call. I mean, you would log onto your computer and you had to be really fast to put yourself out at the station. Otherwise, dispatch was sending you a call like immediately. We would hold priority one calls for an hour sometimes because it was so busy. But what Rodger was saying is it's not just National Night Out. That's not the only connection event. It's not coffee with a cop. It's not these national things to connect. It's the one-on-one, intimate, authentic interactions you have with community members on your call. Even if it's a car stop and there's kids in the back, they're terrified because their parents are terrified. Give the kids some stickers and ask them their names. Make it, add some humanity back into this and you can explain to the people. I was a motor cop for 7 years and sometimes you can get robotic because it's just stop after stop after stop. But you got to remember to this person, especially if working day shift, you're probably pulling over soccer moms and people that don't have a lot of negative interactions with the government. You just ruined their year. And taking the time to just a few minutes to explain it or be kind to their children. They may still be mad, but if the kids are happy and, but it's that authentic interaction one at a time that builds that community trust.
And it only takes a few seconds. A few seconds can actually create years of this cop was a jerk to me. And your interaction with that person was only 10 seconds long. 30 years from now, guess what? That person's probably going to remember that. Or on the opposite end of the spectrum, you were nice to that person. You were a human being. They're going to remember that years later. And, I kind of laugh when I see on social media all these different agencies that are doing coffee with a cop and they bring all their command out there and connect with the community. And it's like, if your officers aren't connecting with the community, that coffee with a cop isn't doing anything. Right? It's really not. It's just it's a dog and pony show to make it look like you want to connect. No, if you truly want to connect with the community, start getting your officers to a point where whether it's through training, whether it's through something, to get them to have that human aspect. Let the human side of your officers come out and connect with the public. Because if you can do that in day-to-day operations, these coffee with the cops, you can still have that, but it'll be far more effective than if the community is not connected. Because listen, the community is going to see right through that, right? If you have officers yelling at people on traffic stops, yelling at kids for whatever reason, because they're having a bad day, that coffee with a cop isn't going to do anything for them. So get those officers to that point where, and it doesn't take much. If you're driving, how many of you guys have ever driven by kids that have a lemonade stand? Did you ever stop and buy lemonade even though you're not thirsty? Or that
Mhm.
kid, I love it when the kids are stirring the lemonade and their hand is actually in the in the lemonade because they're using old Thirst Buster plastic cups, right? 44 ounces, right? And their hand, I'm like, that looks delicious, and I take it with me, I drive. I don't drink it because this kid's hands were all in it, but I'm still gonna buy lemonade. Why? Because they're gonna remember that. Little things like that, pulling over, playing basketball. As a teenager, I got into some trouble as a kid, and sometimes these officers would drive up, and the officers that I remembered, they'd come out and they'd play basketball with us, right? Or they'd come out and just talk to us and not yell at us, not do anything, just kind of introduce themselves to us. Those are the interactions that I remember, and part of the reason why I wanted to be a cop because I saw how respectful and how professional these officers were. And do I remember the ones that yelled at us and that were jerks? Yeah, I remember that. But I'm fortunate enough that I don't have to put that first as my memory. I'd rather put the positive side of policing first. So it makes a big difference.
Yeah. So you talked about playing basketball. There's a community in our county that is definitely not law enforcement friendly. They had a little playground with a basketball hoop, and me and a deputy, we would regularly go down and shoot hoops with the kids. And one night, middle of the night, we're down there dealing with somebody that's out of control. It turned into a knockdown, drag out fight with several deputies and this guy that was out of control. And the whole community screaming at the cops. They don't like the cops. And I hear a kid say, no, he's cool. He plays basketball with us. That investment I did in playing hoops with those kids, because that kid said we were cool, now the community is like, okay, maybe they're okay. It could have gone drastically different, but that little investment of just shooting hoops for a couple minutes every once in a while really paid off.
I think SROs see that a lot, the good SROs.
Yeah.
We, several times I was out on calls with a former SRO and we're dealing with this guy that's running amok, and the SRO will call him by his name, and that suspect will stop and go, "I'm sorry," because it was a good interaction when they were an SRO. It was a mentoring, even though that person still went astray, they stopped fighting.
Yeah.
And, most of the time, if there's no fighting, if there's no resistance, there's no injury, there's no, everything just gets handled with paperwork. So, investing just a couple minutes shooting hoops with kids. I mean, that's, and then the kids, who's going to argue with the kids? The adults come out and say, "Get out of here, we don't want you," and all these kids are like, "No, they're cool." Well, are they going to be assholes and tell the kids to shut up? No, they're not going to do that. Not in public. They're going to wait till they get home and tell them, "Don't be friends with the cops."
You guys are all hitting on really, really important things that I hope decision makers, whether it's the departments or the politicians or whoever is hearing this that needs to hear this. I think that across the country, we are making huge mistakes. The DARE program, Chris was a DARE officer. We had DARE growing up. Now, I have mixed feelings about the DARE program, but I think removing it and removing the officers from the school, that was a mistake. There's more and more removing of SROs. That is a huge mistake. That is so stupid. You said good SROs. Make sure if you're going to have SROs, they're trained properly and they're getting the mental and emotional support. One of the reasons we do what we do, we need to have the wellness piece for all of our first responders. But also, because everybody's short staffed, and I get it, this is, I wish it was that easy when you don't have the manpower. But when Chris was coming up, they had a detective who was proactive with the bad kids. She was at the parties. She was out talking to the gangs and the kids that were causing a ruckus, and she knew what was going to happen. I don't know how much I can share of this, Chris, so you can tell me to shut up at any point.
Well, I don't know what you're going. I don't know what direction you're going with this.
Well, let me just wrap it up. But the fact was the proactive preventive maintenance. She knew what was going to happen. She knew where fights were going to go down. She knew where deals were going to go down. She knew where the parties were at. She had informants. She had all of these things. But because she was embedded in with these kids, they told her stuff, and then they could proactively police, not wait until after a house party gets busted and there's all sorts. I won't say all of the names of things, but the issues that Arizona has been facing, some of that would have been avoided had you had somebody
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Nope, go.
Oh, but what's the key there? What is the key with when this gang detective is out there making connections? The key is trust, right? She earned the trust of these kids to the point where if something came up and if it was criminal related, they had no problems going to her because they trusted her, right? And this is what every officer should strive to do, is to gain that trust in your community. Now, you mentioned I was a DARE officer, and what is the whole point? And I'll ask people this: what do you think DARE was? What's the purpose of DARE? And most people will say, well, it's to teach kids about drugs, but it doesn't work, right? DARE doesn't work. So what doesn't work about an officer being at a school for a day connecting with kids? Why does that not work? Because that's what happens, right? All day I'd be at one school and I would teach the DARE program, but at the same time, I'm walking around. Kids are getting to know me. They're getting comfortable with the police. And there have been several times when on patrol, my former DARE officers, I'd go to DVs and involving one of my former DARE officers and their families, their parents are fighting. And the looks on the kids when they see me walk in, it's like, oh, that's Officer Z, and it makes them feel good. And then parents, more than once this has happened, parents like, oh, you're Officer Z. Hey, Officer Z, even though they were just fighting in a domestic violence situation, but because their kids talked about me, they wanted to meet me. And then it diffused it almost immediately. And so the whole point of DARE isn't just teaching about drugs, it's about connecting with the community. And it's sad when it went away. And it went away because it doesn't work. This is what I kept hearing. The criticism of DARE, it doesn't work. Well, what doesn't work about connecting with community, with kids, right?
So they're measuring the wrong thing.
Exactly.
Well,
They are.
What grade did you teach when you taught DARE? What grade did you teach to?
5th and 6th grade.
That's the problem. That was the failure. 5th and 6th, we were so innocent, and I was very sheltered. 5th and 6th grade, we were taught in 6th grade. None of us knew what drugs were, unless the kids that were growing up with weed and people, their parents were doing it. But the rest of us, we had no idea what it was. So what happened when we were opened, our eyes open to all of this stuff, and I get it, drugs look like candy, drugs are bad, don't do it. But now between 6th to 8th grade is when we saw the increase of drug use, because now they knew what to look for, what to get, what to avoid. And it was a playbook too young. DARE would be very successful freshman year when they're
I'm
actually.
going to push back.
Okay.
I would push back on that too.
Oh, let's go. Let's go.
I'm gonna push back on that because
Yeah.
what you're talking about is we want to be proactive, right? We want to prevent this from happening. And at that age, 6th grade, 5th and 6th, that's a good age for them to be educated in this because you're right.
Mhm.
You said it yourself. They're going into junior high school. We don't want to wait for them to get there to educate them. We want them to be so comfortable with the police in elementary school that when they do encounter some of this stuff, hey, Officer Z, I ran into this stuff, the drugs this kid offered me. Or I remember what Officer Z said, don't take this stuff, don't do this stuff. Because when I flash back into 1989, when I was in 6th grade, my DARE officer, I did, listen, I'm a 6th grader. But I listened to my DARE officer, and because of that, I never did drugs. So for me, it was very effective. And I think had I not had that, given the group that I was hanging out with, which were gang members, I probably would have went the opposite direction. But because DARE was there and it educated me, it actually helped me. So I'm going to push back a little bit. But Neil, I think you had something.
Yeah, I would. So about 10 years ago, we were at the junior high in the town I was working in at the time on a sexual assault call between two junior high kids, two 7th graders. And I was lamenting to the principal saying, I can't believe these are kids. These are 12 and 13-year-olds and sexual assault. She said, I've got two 12-year-olds pregnant right now at school. So 5th and 6th is not too young. I mean, you could probably push that back to 4th grade with DARE and start teaching them much younger about the problems of it because they will get the information one way or the other. And just because that's like, when you say you're giving a playbook to find the drugs, that's saying asking somebody if they're suicidal is going to put that idea in their head and they're going to commit suicide. And that's not accurate. So, in my opinion, that's not accurate. You've got the PhD, but I would say the younger we can teach these kids and the younger we can get into the schools, the SROs are always in the high schools. but it's good to have the SROs go down to the elementary schools, down to first grade, down to kindergarten, sit and read a Dr. Seuss book once a week, just so they can get used to the idea of a police officer being human and not arresting their parents or giving them tickets or what they see on TV. Same thing with the drugs. That the kids know. They know at a very young age. So the idea that they're too young or you're putting it in their heads, I think is just um, not consistent with my experiences.
Well, and I'll shift my going younger. I would say go younger with it. So, like gun safety. There's been many, many, many studies shown where you put kids into a room, and those that were raised with gun safety and gun awareness did not touch the gun. Those that were not allowed to even do finger guns, those are the first ones to pick up the gun. So I would say, okay, yeah, maybe drugs and all of that needs to be taught younger. So coming from the PhD, the clinical hypnotherapist subconscious part is if there is a child that isn't in a household that is doing drugs or alcohol, by the time they hit fifth or sixth, they've already been exposed to it so much that that's going to be the deciding path of what they're going to do and how they're going to do it and how they're processing the traumas and the coping mechanisms. Fifth and sixth grade is a very pivotal age. We have sixth, seventh graders now. They absorb so much. And yeah, that drama, all of the stuff that I'm like, I thought we had years before we dealt with this. And it's like, nope, it's now. It was years ago. It's like, holy shit. So yeah, I would agree. Maybe doing a little bit more awareness younger would maybe be beneficial. There isn't it's not black and white. There's so many shades of gray. For me, I was so oblivious. I mean, my dad was a cop, so I was sheltered. I didn't know any of it. So it opened up my eyes. And to this day, I still have images of like, don't eat certain gummy bears or whatever, because that's bad and that's scary. But what worked for me to not do drugs, my dad took a totally different approach, two different approaches with me. One, when it came to drugs, he's like, I'm going to take you to the jail and I'm going to show you the burnouts. And he did. So I, as a youth, was going through the jails and seeing people tweaking and, and he's like, that's what's going to end up. And he put the fear into me. So I was like, healthy fear. And then he was smart. And I've shared this story, several times on the podcast, that this was very smart on his part. So for our law enforcement parents that have this ability to do, my dad told me in high school I could go to the parties and I would not get in trouble. I wouldn't get busted. And I'm like, you're the same guy that would threaten to send me to juvie for not cleaning my room or getting good grades. So what's the catch? And he's like, if you go to the party, I'm going to bust it. You're going to be, or your friends are going to go to juvie for underage drinking. The adults are going to go to jail for supplying minors, and you're going to be the school narc. And I was like, I will not go to these parties. It's a genius parenting hack that is very effective. No, but like these kinds of conversations, I would invite department leaders to have roundtables to bring in the communities and say, hey, we don't have the answers. We had a DARE program. We just had this, you can use the podcast as a conversation and say, hey, we want to protect the communities. We want to protect your kids. What do you guys think? And of course, you're going to get your stooges. You're going to get the people that just need to learn how to silence and listen and learn and not just speak. Psychologically speaking, those that are yapping, as children, you were never actually heard. So you need to be heard. That's called therapy. Pay for it, go. But with the communities, you can get some really good dialogue and build that relationship with them.
So in our community, we've got a community group that gets together to talk about youth issues. And we go as a police department, we're a participant in that. But probably the most powerful part of that is there's student representation in that group. And so, and they're good kids that are just assertive enough to push back when a 30-year cop says, we should do this. And they're like, no, that'll never work. Because they know kids today. It's not like it was for me when I was growing up. And so to have the kids have a voice that is heard and respected, man, we get some good things done just because they're thinking of things we never would have.
So you guys were all just at our recalibration retreat that we had, and you participated in the cross the line exercise. So I know a lot of the audience is not going to know what I'm talking about, but bear with me with this. We did an activity where we have everybody stand on one side of a line, and then there's a series of questions that are asked. And everybody, if you answer yes to that question, you step across the line. And we do that in a manner to show the connectivity and that you're not alone. Who's lost a family member to cancer, who's, lost somebody to suicide, who knows somebody that's an alcoholic, an addict, all of these harder questions. And we watch who these people are that cross the line. And the way that we do it at the retreat is I have everybody put their hand on their heart. For those that are crossing over, if you're not crossing, you put your hand on your heart and you hold space and you send them love and support. Do you guys know where I learned to do that? I will just 100% say I stole this activity because it was so great. You guys have any idea where I learned about that? MTV actually did a thing called Challenge Day, and I was asked to be a volunteer to go to a school, and I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And so I went to a school. The students that had been, they were selected to be part of this. The principal was there, the SRO was there in uniform, teachers were there, volunteers were there, and the students were there. And it was a larger school, and it was a mixed bag of students. You had your emo goth kids, your jocks, you had your, honor roll, you had everybody in this mix. And we did the cross the line challenge, and I'm going to cry. Oh, everybody participated. So for the students to see the SRO, the principal, and the teachers cross the line with them, and for them to see the students, that the heaviness that these kids are dealing with, we're talking at young ages, right? You guys know this because you're law enforcement, too young to be dealing with shit. So everybody's crossing the line. The way that we did it, everybody crossed the line, and then we did breakout sessions where the volunteers held space and we had these conversations. And then at the end of it, everybody got a chance with the microphone to speak. And the healing, there was a group of bullies and the kid that they bullied all in that group. They all apologized. They became friends. They buried their shit right there. Like, it just connected the whole room so much that this was 10 years ago. I'm still getting this emotional. And so I've implemented it, and you guys saw how powerful it was amongst, we did it with police chiefs and different levels of law enforcement. It's such a powerful exercise, but we need to do more of that. If I don't know if MTV is not even a thing anymore, but if they're doing Challenge Day, whoever it was that facilitated that, if this makes it to you, like, seriously, we need to do more of that. Let's talk. But those types of activities where you get to see each other and the humanness is the quickest way to connect.
That was a powerful exercise. Going through that, I don't like to share in other people's misery, but somehow seeing that other chiefs were experiencing all these things, that sometimes you feel like you're on an island, like I'm the only one that takes, I had a coworker that was killed in the line of duty. And so that somehow puts me in this isolated group. Everybody could experience that. If you've been in this career long enough, you've seen some things. And to see the other chiefs in that room repeatedly walk across that line, like, wow.
And I learned that from kids.
Yeah.
I think that's a big, big part. Social media and ignorant people are teaching our youth to fear cops and not run to you guys as safety. And when you have the fear, that creates more problems. The community fears cops. And in some places, maybe rightfully so. We all know there are shitty cops out there. The community needs to understand. We emphasize this. You know who hates bad cops more than the community?
Good cops.
All the good cops, because it makes everybody's job that much harder and that much more dangerous. So for the community members that might be tuning in, maybe there's one or two of you, hopefully. Feel free, if you're not comfortable with your local department, maybe they are a little bit more toxic. It happens. Totally happens. You can reach out to our company and talk to us. We're not, my ego would say we're not toxic. We're pretty good at what we do. And we can help. We can also work with if maybe you're part of a toxic department, you are somebody that's employed, and you don't know what to do, you can also reach out and we can give you little things. Can you move the needle from, 0 to 100 overnight? No, but can you move the needle a little bit in the right direction? 100%. And if you can't control your department, whether you're a community member or in it, you can control yourself and you can control how you connect with people and lead by example and be that person.
I think when you're talking about like an entire toxic department ruining community relations or classifying them as bad cops, sometimes they're not bad cops that can be dealt with. They just have um, they're not comfortable talking to the community in a human way because they've been taught to be a Robocop. And that one officer can really erode the community trust because they are acting like a Robocop or not showing the humanity. So for the community and the police officers listening to this, if you're that person, try and change. But if you're not that person and you work with that person, try to lead by example. So, really, it's incumbent upon the rest of the officers to not fall into that trap of being the hardcore cop that just rides around in his car and yells at people through the PA all day. You want to build that community trust. So if you have that one cop doing that, talk to him, talk to that officer, and see what's going on. See how they think that their policing style is working for the community. And if you kind of pin him into that corner, him or her into that corner, saying, why do you think your style is good and working? They're going to have to reflect, or they're just going to shut down and say they don't care and, take me to IA. But a lot of people look at the chiefs as, it's the chief's responsibility to push this down. There's also a lot of peer pressure at the bottom that it's incumbent upon everybody to be a leader at all levels. And, from the newest trainee, it's okay to hand out a sticker if you see a kid crying. Start that very young and not and kind of isolate the ones that are hurting the reputation of the department and figure out how you can do better with them to get them on board and to change the culture.
Yeah, I want to build on that. It's like you said, a lot of people look towards the chiefs or the other leadership ranks to push that down. But for me, over my years, the most powerful moments have been when my peers have delivered those messages. When I was brand new, there was another deputy that pulled me aside and called me out on something that I was doing and how I was doing it. And if a sergeant had done the same thing, I would have just been like, I just got scolded by the sergeant. Like,
Mhm.
that guy's a jerk. But I had a peer do it. Like, it somehow made it more real. And I felt like I was letting my team down a little bit. I wasn't being scolded by my boss. I was being scolded by a peer, way more powerful.
Well, it comes down to, I think, sorry, Neil, did you have something?
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say it comes down to self-awareness. Those officers that are yelling at people, chances are they didn't start out that way. Chances are they started out like all of us. We want to help people. We're very passionate about policing. And then at some point in their career, they took this downward turn towards negativity, which again, teaching duty driven, that's in burnout, right? And what are the characteristics of burnout is negativity and being cynical. So what is happening in this officer's personal life that's causing them to treat people this way? And I think this is how we solve that issue by providing training, providing self-awareness to officers so that they know how to alleviate some of that stress that they carry. Because we don't know that officer that's yelling at people, probably maybe 2 years ago, that officer gave CPR to a dying baby and the baby didn't make it. And that officer's been dealing with it for 2 years. And now he or she is at that point where they are in burnout and they don't know what to do. Why? Because they don't recognize it. And I think this is why every chief that's listening, it's important that you get some type of training, you get some kind of awareness to your officers so they have that self-awareness to know maybe there's something wrong with me and what can I do to fix this? Because we didn't start out this way.
Well, I want to build on that too with what we all have the awareness and know. So you guys, when you get into law enforcement, you guys talk about you wanted to get the bad guys. You guys were high performers. There's something to prove at the beginning of the career. You're gung ho, you're in it, and you get those high performers. I think we have this conversation all the time, and especially as chiefs and departments where you get the 7-year itch, where the 7-year itch is happening more around the 3 to 5 year mark. People get in, it's not new anymore, and now we hear it all the time. This is not what I expected. When we coach, it's like, okay, well, what did you expect? And then we kind of unpack that. But you get them into this point where they're going. Now they've responded to some of these calls. They've had these things and they haven't talked about it, or maybe they have, but now their home life is starting to break down. So what do? A high performer that doesn't have the self-awareness or the support or the resources, they don't go seek the proper wellness channels. They work harder. They go lean more into the career. They go into, I'm going to work more. I'm going to be better. I'm going to do this. And they continue to hyper focus on being the best high performer that they can be. And that's a trap, because you can only go so far so fast before something is going to start breaking down. And so I would look at if you have those people, especially if you're somebody in a department that's looking at somebody that is in that Robocop persona, and they weren't necessarily, some people are just assholes all the way through the career. Okay. But for those that were like, hey, they started this way and now they're really shut down. Chris teaches about this too. He got to this point. He had situations that turned him into not going to show emotion, going to be Robocop. And he was dealing with compassion fatigue and all of these different traits. And it took somebody else that came in with sensitivity to make him be like, oh, shoot. And I get it. It's a peer. So peer to peer, we talk so much, there's so much emphasis on titles and rank in law enforcement of who the leaders are. But we all know that there are leaders that don't have the title that are the true leaders in some of these departments. And so that peer to peer connection, pulling people aside, asking those questions, saying, hey, let's go get lunch and what's going on with you, that can save somebody. But your high performers, I would really check in with them. Don't just take it for granted that they're showing up and doing the job and that they're fine, because the high performers, they're struggling. No pushback?
No, I would agree. Yeah, the high performers don't know they're burning out until they have a flame out and they're either ejecting or crashing, because they are. I mean, they're just on a mission, and sometimes it's okay to pull them back from something if they've requested to do everything, every assignment that they're all collateral duties. It might be okay to pull them aside and say, you know what, I think you have too much on your plate. We want to give somebody else an opportunity to do this, and explain why you're trying to protect. They're a lot of them are seeing right now. They're seeing the immediate. They're not looking ahead to the future, where when you're a little older and you got gray, you can see how those, if somebody had pulled you aside earlier on in your career and said, hey, why don't you sit this one out? You're doing enough already. We appreciate you, but let somebody else have a chance, and you take a breath. How that may have impacted you. I think we've all had rough spots in our careers. Very few police officers don't have rough areas in their careers. And that may have just eased that rough spot just a little bit more. Plus, it lets people know that you care.
Yeah. Yeah, Neil, you mentioned you were in motors. I did motors for years as well, and I loved it. It was a highlight of my career. And that I got pulled out of motors at one point, and it was probably one of the best things that could have happened to me. And I thought it was the worst, but I was reaching that burnout point, and I was working harder and harder and harder, but not getting any satisfaction out of it at all. And it really hit the reset button by pulling me out of that. And it wasn't disciplinary. It was, my time was up. It was a limited time for our agency to do that. It was right on what you're talking about.
Well, and if you're listening to this and you are a high performer, or if you're somebody or whatever it is, but if you're like, I don't want to sit out, or I don't want to take time off because that's going to give you too much, you might not say this to you, but if it's going to give you too much time to think and you don't want to be alone with your thoughts, here's your sign. it is time to go seek some sort of mental health professional and to go talk it through. If you cannot be alone and you're working and constantly having to be busy because you can't sit in the silence, you need to go seek out some sort of support, even if it's your peer support, whoever it is.
And I think along those lines too is if if you can be in a room full of people that you could care about, that you love, your friends, and you still feel alone, that's a clue. That's a clue that something is not right. And you're probably dealing with burnout or you're dealing with breakdown, a breakdown of your mental emotional state, breakdown of your career, or you're burned out, right? And again, that's to me, when I went through my darker times, that's how I felt. I felt like I felt isolated. And in a way, I was self isolating and I didn't want to be around people. And when I was, like I said, I could be in a room full of people that I know that I care about, but I can feel like the loneliest person out there. I didn't recognize it at that time what was happening to me. But I would say to anybody listening to this, if that's how you feel, just understand you're probably dealing with something. You probably want to get and seek some help out. Reach out to a coworker, reach out to your peer support people. If you guys have it, you can always reach out to law enforcement coaching. Reach out to somebody if that's what you're experiencing.
I have a question for you guys. For the, with community, you get a lot of people saying thank you for your service. How do you guys, because some people, it's hit and miss for cops with that. Military, they're very used to that. Cops are like, I don't know. How do you guys feel when somebody says thank you for your service?
It's my honor.
No, I love it. I mean, it's um, if it's genuine, it means you're connecting with them, right? And
Mhm.
that's what you want to do. You want to find that connection.
Yeah, I same thing. I enjoy it. I like it because it's confirmation. We don't get the pat on the back. We don't get the attaboy all the time, right? And when somebody says, thank you for your service, that right there is confirmation that, okay, I'm doing the right thing here.
So one of the most powerful things for myself growing up is when my dad would say he was proud of me. Just hearing, "Hey, I'm proud of you." And I try to tell that to my son all the time. I try to tell it to my officers. But when you hear that from the community, and we're proud of our police department, we're proud of our officers, or hey, I want to thank this officer for what they did, and that cops may not want to admit it, but they love it. It
Mhm.
it keeps you going.
Well, we had another powerful moment at the retreat as well. We had Ryan Lane from Newhalem. Chris, do you guys remember what he told you?
Yeah, I think
Okay,
he
well, we
said
talked about, okay, let me get more specific on that because we talked a lot about, no, we were talking about, it was when we did the most time on and new person, and Ryan came up as the civilian side of it, and he thanked and he did his civilian perspective. So I'm trying to pull that out of you because I want you guys to remember because it was a very emotional moment. Chris, you got choked up with it.
Yeah. No, again, it's confirmation. This is coming from somebody that I don't know, and he talked about it. How he was appreciative of what we do, and I don't know. It just hit me. It hit me like, yeah, like that. This is why we do this.
Yeah, I was one of the guys standing up there as the longest tenured, and so he was standing right across from me when he was saying that, and I could see in the emotions of his eyes how real it was.
Do you guys remember what he said? And I will be honest, sorry, Ryan, I don't remember exactly because I was all caught up in the emotion.
I don't.
I don't. It was heartfelt.
It
Yeah.
was he just took the civilian stance of seeing you guys for what you go through, how much you show up, and that if it weren't for you guys, the community would not be protected. And he can go to sleep at night knowing you guys are out there doing these hard things, something along those lines. But for the community members, if for the community members that want to connect with, that are trying to connect with and not really sure. I know a lot of people will pay for your coffees and lunches and whatnot, which that's always nice. Thank you for your service is good. But I would also, for the community, those compliments of taking it a little bit further. Like, thank you guys for showing up even though you have such a hard job or protecting communities. We see you, any of the little extra steps, you're going to get the, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. But I promise you to the community, those cops are going to go home, and that's going to last and hit them. If you want to hit straight to the heart, give them a genuine compliment. It means more than you realize.
So something I do when I receive those compliments, and it's from peers, from officers, whoever, I always follow up with why. Because whatever I did, I don't want it to be accidental, and I want to be purposeful in what I do. So whatever resonated with you when you're giving me this compliment, tell me why it resonated so I can repeat it, so I can build upon it. And that usually sparks a really cool conversation just to get a little deeper into it.
Well, and let's go back. I want to go back to traffic stops really quick. Because nobody likes getting pulled over, nobody likes getting a ticket. And I last year I was on Maui, and I lived on Maui for 10 years. Nothing. I never got pulled over. And then I go back on vacation. I've only gotten one speeding ticket in my entire life, and that's what I'm talking about right now. And boy, did my ego, I was not happy about that. 100% I was speeding. I will say, I'm already justifying. I didn't know that it was what it was. I didn't do it. I did not realize that I was going 20 over. I did think I was going 10 over. I really did think the speed limit was 55, not 45. So when he pulled me over and I had my daughter in the car, and I was like, I was just running through all of the stuff like, oh shit. And of course, I'm going to try to get out of it. But as soon as he came to the window, I read him and I was like, oh, I'm getting a ticket. I am not getting out of this one. And now I had different opportunities in this moment where I could have tried to use my status as law enforcement coaching to try to get out of it and use that. I didn't. Um, I I effed up. I was speeding. I apologized. I gave my ID. I did all this stuff. He walked back. I'm like, I am getting a ticket, and that sucks. Now, going back to the cops, remember the people that are getting the ticket, it impacts, it's more than just a slap on the wrist. Like, we drive away crying, not just because we got pulled over, but like it affects everything. It can affect our insurance. My daughter witnessed it. My ego experienced it. It's a whole emotional thing. So have a little bit more compassion in that. However, after he gave me the ticket, after I owned it. Then I introduced myself of who I was and thanked him and told him he was safe on the traffic stop and all of that stuff. We ended up talking on the side of the road for 20 extra minutes. And he was like, why didn't you? He's like, I can't reverse the ticket. I'm like, I effed up. I own that. And he's like, I appreciate that. Like, I super appreciate that. So many people try to flex, and we see that there's so much body cam footage of mayors and politicians getting all bent out of shape. Do you know who I am? Do you know that you were speeding? Like, own your shit. Sorry, that's a side thing. But, we had that personable conversation, and he was getting ready to retire. And I was like, what are you going to do? He's like, I'm going to surf. I hope he's retired, and I hope he's just surfing. But just when you're getting pulled over, for everybody on the side, for the cops, you have a job to do, but also have some compassion. My dad used to be, I don't know what Roger, when you worked with him, but when he was in Newhalem, I was with him on this traffic stop. So he pulled over a van, parents, and a whole bunch of kids, little kids. Now, when you go into Newhalem, there's one general store, and then it's 72 miles over a windy mountain pass to get to Eastern Washington. There's no gas stations. There's nowhere to stop except for pullouts. He gave them the option. They could take the ticket because they were speeding, or he made them go to the store, and he's like, you're going to take the kids to the store. You're going to buy them anything that they want, candy, ice cream, sodas. You can't say no. And then you guys are going to go on your way. And so, like, there's little things. They learned their lesson. Guess what? You don't speed through the town. So you can have a little bit more compassion with it. And on that note, to the community, can we please just really quick address why you shouldn't be pushing back and the dangers that cops really face on. Chris has broken me of the habit of saying a routine traffic stop. There is no routine traffic stop. And will you guys kind of just lean into that and explain to the community what all of the different factors that go into a traffic stop?
I think, and part of that, with telling officers on the traffic stops, have some compassion, I would like to point out that when you're, especially a motor cop, working 10-hour shifts for 9.5 hours, you're getting yelled at. I mean, it's just constant because it's insurance is going up, everything's going up, everyone's innocent, nobody's speeding, everybody stopped, made a complete stop. And very, very few people own own it that they did what they did. So the officers are getting just vileness at them all day long, where the patrol officers still get it. I don't think they get it as much because they're not having, they handle a call and it takes an hour, and then they handle another call and it takes an hour. So they're not interacting with as many people as motor cops do. Because a traffic stop, you can stop somebody, write them a ticket, send them on their way, and it's under 5 minutes. And you can do that 10 times an hour times, 8 hours or whatever. So there is some of that. And to the officers out there working motors, do wellness care, try and let that go. To the community members, understand that when the officer is pulling you over, especially, motor cops do it all the time. So it's a little different, but a lot of times with traffic stops, they're taught in the academy, everybody wants to kill you. So when you pull somebody over, you're immediately thinking they're going to jump out with a gun, or they're going to kill you, or they have warrants, or they have, a nuclear bomb in the trunk or something, because that's what they teach you in the academy, and that's what they teach you in FTO. And the fact is, most of the time they don't have it. But, police officers want to go home to their families too. We want to be safe. So we treat everyone with a little bit of suspicion until we can get the facts of the case and know what's going on, and know that it's, somebody's grandma that is not a threat at all. But for the officers, once you figure that out, it's important to start adding some humanity back. You can be careful, but you can be human at the same time.
So one of my favorite experiences throughout my career is the times when I've taken somebody to jail and you're getting ready to shut that heavy steel door, and they turn to you and they say, "Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for treating me like a man. Thank you for being
Mhm.
kind. Thank you for being cool." However they put it. But that has happened so many times throughout my career, and that is what I always strive for. Is the situation? It's not my job to make that situation worse for them. They're in a bad spot already, um, and you can do that on the traffic stops too. Is you got to be careful. You got to be cautious, but you don't have to be so assertive that you actually aggravate the situation. And I've seen cops so many times do that. They come off with their chests puffed up because they're the authority. Nobody reacts well to that. So
And I was that cop. I was that. I just reconnected with an old partner, um, and she said she always remembered our calls together because she would, go out to a disturbance call, get everything calmed down. I'd show up on scene, and we'd be in a fight. And that took a few years of me being an asshole to figure out that that's not the way I wanted to present myself to the community. And to the officers, once you get a jacket, it's tough to take it off. I mean, 25 years later, she's still talking about the times that I got people, goaded them into fighting. Um, and I'm not proud of it. It's not a good thing. It has benefited me in the fact that I can pass that on to other officers and say, don't do this, don't be this way, don't get in fights just to get in fights. If there's no reason for anger or raising your voice, don't raise your voice. So yeah, I got a little vulnerable right there that I admitted that, but it's true. I mean, it's and if you are one of those guys that does it, or ladies that does it that way, there's still time. You can change. You can be a chief. You can go on and have a great career and not get a lot of IAs, which I had a lot of IAs, but
so I struggled early on where I wanted people in the traffic stops to admit that they did whatever I stopped them
yeah.
for. And I didn't, you stopped for speeding. I wasn't speeding. Yes, you were. We could go back and forth. And then I just changed it to, "That's interesting." And I'd write the ticket. And it would just kill the argument. I'm like, I'm not going to engage in the argument. But I used to let it affect me personally that they were arguing the obvious to me.
Right.
There's no doubt that you were speeding. But I just let that go. It's like, well, think what you want. Here's your ticket. Have a safe day.
Well, and also remember, there's a couple things too. I remember every single time. Now, I only have received the one ticket, but I've been pulled over several times. I remember every single time because I'm a goody goody. Like, I don't like getting in trouble. So if I get pulled over, I am ready to cry and be like, "Oh my God, I'm in trouble. I don't want to be in trouble. I'm sorry. I'm sorry." And I do. I remember the interactions. There was one where the cop could have just. I was on a road trip, so I had driven from Arizona back up to Washington, and I had just gone and had a facial or something with my friend, and I turned the corner and he pulled me over because my tabs were expired. Now I'm on a road trip, so I did not realize that they had expired. And I go to grab my purse. I had left it at my friend's office. And I'm like, okay, so now I don't have a purse. I don't have a license on me. I'm like, hold on, hold on, hold on. Let me call her before she leaves her office. Like, I got to get my purse. And so I'm trying to figure it out. My tabs were expired. My insurance had expired because I was on a road trip and I wasn't paying attention. I did not have a driver's license on me. Oh my God. He could have just been like, check, 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 yeah, whatever. And my friend did come, brought me my purse, and he was so nice about it. He's like, get your stuff together so that you have an easy trip, safe travels. He was so nice. And I wish, because we've been working up there, that was in Mount Vernon. I wish I remember who the actual officer was, because odds are we've been working with them since. But that little things like that, like I cried the whole way, but I'm also so thankful. But going back to the community, in Arizona, we have bad guys here. We know multiple people that have been shot and killed from a traffic stop. Um, there are human trafficking, there are drugs, there are bad things in cars. So if you are a community member getting pulled over, get your ego out of it. Nobody knows that you're innocent. You might know that you're innocent, but the cop does not know anything. So just do what they're asking you to do. Everybody we need to do more training. I mean, the whole last month was put your ego in check. We need to do more of that. Chris, do you have anything you want to add?
Well, so I help teach. I used to train at an MMA gym, and the owner asked if I would teach not a concealed carry, but a covert carry for some of their gym members, some of their black belts. And I said, yeah, sure, because they're good people there. And I taught them, the legal aspects of carrying it concealed, because in Arizona you don't need a CCW, but also how to draw from using plain clothes. Um, and I added at the very end, I added an exercise where they were to draw using plain clothes, but there's an officer arriving on scene. I'm the officer, and I start barking orders at them. Police, drop the gun, do it now, just like you would in law enforcement if you got called out to a house or any location where somebody was shot. Because I told them the scenario is you shot somebody. Now law enforcement's on scene. And half of them were kind of struggling with following orders, right? Some of them were trying to argue with me. Well, this is my house. I live here. I live here. And I explained to them, and I upped it up. I ramped it up some more, and I said, drop the gun, do it now, police, da da da, right? And eventually they did. They did what I said, but it took them a while to do it. And I asked them, how do you feel? And the owner of the gym said, it was demeaning. I go, interesting. Why is it demeaning? This is my location. I'm defending my family, and now you're telling me to drop my gun, put it down. And I explained to them the reason why we do that. We can't differentiate the difference between good guy and bad guy. We don't live there. We don't know them. I go, the officer who arrives on scene, they don't care that you own this gym. They don't care that you have a black belt. They don't care that you do this or you do that. They don't care that I'm a retired cop if they don't know me, right? So it's important for you to follow orders. That demeaning feeling, yeah, you might feel that way, but there's a reason why officers do this, for the safety of everybody. Plus, not to mention, if you get into a shooting at your house, you've got somebody who's bleeding out right now. The longer that you and I argue, less likelihood or less time we have to focus on this individual to give life-saving efforts. Not to mention, if there was a shootout, we have to find those other rounds are unaccounted for. And if you have family members in here, if you have kids in here, we've got to find them. Not to mention, you got neighbors, bullets go through walls. We have to do all this. When I explained it to them in that aspect, we did the scenario over again. This time they all followed orders immediately, right? And I thought, wow, what happened there? Education. That's what happened. We educated them on why it's important to follow orders and don't argue, because we need to get a job done. And we don't know you. Sorry, we don't know you own this house. Sorry, we don't know you who you are, that you're a good guy, that you work with police and that you train police. We don't know that. So it's important to follow orders. And to me, I think that was the most effective part of that training, was that aspect of it, because that is what gets people sadly injured, right? They don't want to follow those orders.
Well, and I think officers can do a better job in those scenarios when it's happening for real, because once things are calmed down, take a moment to explain why.
Mhm.
Otherwise, people are going to remain in that angry, demeaned state. And you can hit that reset button like, hey, I'm sorry I had to be assertive with you. This is why, explain it. And pretty soon they're going to, oh, that makes sense. Or you can just leave them in that angry state and nobody wins with that.
Mhm. Yeah.
And again, 2 minutes is connecting with the community.
Yep.
And that person will remember it and tell their friends and tell their friends.
Yep.
You don't need coffee with a cop. You can do it on every call.
So,
Every call.
Tami, can I shift gears just a little bit? Talking about connecting with the community, I want to tell a story about when I came to Blaine as a chief. I told the interview panels that my goal was to create an army of advocates within the community. I wanted the community to know me and our officers so well that if somewhere else in the country some bad scenario happened with the officers, my local community was going to go, that's horrible, but that's not our guys. Like, they knew who we were. And boy, that paid off. I was at a community event when one of our, Neil called them the Three Stooges, one of them showed up and just kind of went off on me in front of the whole audience. And a community member who I had met and talked to came up and literally took the microphone out of my hand and put this person in their place and said, that is not our police department. That is not our chief. And so now I've got the community advocating for me. That is way more powerful than anything I could have said.
Yep.
And because I had taken a few minutes, Neil just said 2 minutes with somebody, I'd had a couple of conversations with this person and connected with her and built that relationship. And it pays off. It really does.
I want to build on that as well. The community, we've been having this conversation. We talked a little bit about it in the leadership with Chief Earl Morrison as well. For the departments and your people that need to leave, whether they're retiring, they're lateraling, they're burned out, they don't want to be in law enforcement anymore, or whatever the reason is that they are leaving your agency, a lot of times departments will just shut down on that person.
Mhm.
Okay, we need bodies, and now you're leaving, and now I'm in a stressful position, and whatever, I got to go over here and focus. If you let your people leave and you still support them and keep that relationship alive with your law enforcement, whatever the scenario is, if they leave on good terms, that is somebody in your community, or if they're moving to another community that's trained, that will have your officers' backs, that will have your community's backs, that can be a possible, they might come back eventually, or they might be a reserve. That is somebody that will be a positive part of your community. But a lot of departments kind of shit on people, and now they're sitting there disgruntled, and they have all of their other things of why they're not in law enforcement anymore on top of that. So for the department leaders, if you have somebody leaving for whatever reason, especially your retirees, keep those relationships alive, because that is strengthening your community or breaking your community as well. So on that, I want to honor everybody's time. I think this was a really great conversation. Thank you guys. I hope somebody takes something away from this conversation. There's so much useful information. If again, for the departments, if you're needing some support, you want to talk, reach out to us, to the community. If you have questions, a lot of this stuff there isn't a training. So if nobody else is doing it, we'll do it. We'll come on and do a live call with community and field questions. I will not tolerate hate and ignorant stupidity. You'll get out of here. But if you want to have an actual conversation and ask questions to learn, we're more than happy to have that conversation. So in true fashion, I want to go around, and if somebody were to just tune in to this last little part of the podcast, what is your 2-second mic drop takeaway moment piece of advice that you would have? I will have Chris, whoever wants to go first.
Yeah, I would say just the importance of connecting with community. We can't be everywhere at one time, and we can get outnumbered really quick in those emergency situations. So if you have a positive working relationship with the community, a good positive connection, uh, hopefully you don't ever have to need them, to come to your rescue to help you out. But it sure is nice if that does happen, right? Because they support you and they come and they got your back. So connecting with the community, that's a huge part of policing. It's not just about running and chasing bad guys and putting them in jail. It is about connecting with the community.
I would say that the time to invest is now. You invest in your relationship not at a time when you need something. You invest in it before you need anything. So, and it doesn't have to be a big, huge investment to pay off in dividends later. That's the way investments work. You put a dime in, you get a quarter out later. Invest now, even if it's small, it'll pay off big.
Every community interaction is your opportunity to leave them with a positive or negative view. Always strive to be positive and always strive to be authentic.
My last little bit, community, whether you're in law enforcement or not, if shit were to hit the fan, catastrophic events, big problems, the community is the first line. You guys all work, you're going to be the first ones on scene. Before the cops can get to you, you're going to be the first ones to show up. So within your communities, you guys need to have that connection, and then knowing that you have a good relationship with your first responders so that you can all work to get through whatever the situation is. Because if you're not connected before, I promise you, once there's a catastrophic event, you will be connected after. So don't even let it get to that point. Build your community and take care of each other. We need to be kind. Get off social media. People are still nice out there. Not everybody sucks. So be nice to each other. On that note, thank you all for tuning in, and until next week.